Hey there, Chad here, and this is the Pro Cyclist mode of Pro Cycling Manager 23. This is, I believe, my 10th episode in this beginners series. And in this one, we're going to talk about a couple of strange finishes I had here in the last few days, as well as the start of the contracts process. So first of all, I'm finishing up stage 5 of the GP of Alentejo in Portugal, and I had a really peculiar finish. So what you'll see here is I decided to ignore the team orders to try to drive the team a little bit. I was actually sitting pretty well. I thought I could maybe get a top 20 GC finish. I did not want to lead at the front because I just didn't have the energy to finish the race well if I did that. But by not actually really doing anything, what you'll see here is the breakaway gets ridiculously far ahead of the peloton. They get as much as 20 minutes ahead of the peloton, and they end up finishing 15 minutes ahead of the peloton, which I have never seen before in one of these races. And as you'll see, I do end up with a 36th place finish, which pulls me down a little bit and dropped me into a 21st overall. So just outside the top 20. Wouldn't have gotten any points for that, but it would have been nice to at least have that on the resume that we had that pretty solid finish in a 5-stage race. Now, after that tour, we cross over into April, and two things occur when you cross over into April. First of all, I do get 60 points of experience for the month of March, and that's great, although it doesn't put me anywhere near hitting level 5. But the other thing that happens is we get to start talking about finding new contracts for next year. We are able to negotiate with other teams to decide if we want to change teams. There's salary negotiations, although you don't really speak about them directly, but let's go ahead and start that process. It will start with emails on April 1st. And if you look at this, basically our agent is telling us that he's been looking at some teams and he's going to tell us what to do. So you can read through this. At this level, I have the ability to probably interact with one team. So I think the important part here is the interest can increase until August, either by achieving remarkable results, so we need to do well, or by giving our agent the time to work on the dossier of one or more teams that we choose for him to target. Right now, with my level, I'll really only have the ability for him to impact the dossier of one team. So I'll need to decide what team I want him to focus on. And I can change that. I believe each month it will ask if I want to continue with that one or move on to another team. And so there's a couple of strategies you could employ. You could decide I want to be on this specific team and focus on that one and have him do that for the rest of the season. That does not mean you'll get an offer from that team. There does need to be a certain amount of performance on your part. In general, I think 4 out of 5 times I get an offer from the team that I target when I choose to do that. You can also choose to target more than one team, so he splits his time over the various months and will improve your interest with that team. Let's take a look at that though. So real quick though, finishing this, August is when we'll start to receive offers, so don't be surprised by that. And let's look at the other email real quick. Yeah, so this is where he tells you that he can change who he's focusing on. And we will just need to go to our contract page. So that's actually under rider data, just so you know how to get there manually if you delete the email. But it's so the email, you can click on it right here, and I think it'll take us there. We will eventually need to accept the email so that we can continue on. But we can go to rider data, contract. Okay, so here's all the teams that potentially would be interested in us for next season. I have not had a stellar season, so I only have Continental teams. There's not even a Continental Pro team listed here. Usually I have a few Continental Pro teams at the end of my first year, maybe 1 or 2, looking at me as a possible rider for their team. that kind of demonstrates how poorly this particular season has gone, and that's fine. I chose a different build out than I've normally played, so that's not to be unexpected, I suppose. We have one remaining contract of interest point. So this is what the agent can affect. And how we put that into play is we basically will click a plus here to add interest into a specific team. I'm going to want to review this, and I will do that offline to determine which team I want to go with. But a couple of things to consider. You want to be on a good squad, but you don't want to be the very last rider on a really strong squad, because you won't get picked for many races and you're not going to improve very much. You can look at your current team. In my case, Radio Papa will happily take me up next year. As you can see, they have full interest in me. They will probably offer me a contract. In fact, they certainly will offer me a contract. I am not entirely sure what happens if you refuse all your contracts. I don't know if the game ends. I've never done that. As you know, the game doesn't have a way to really back out after you make a change like that, so I haven't really played with it to see what happens there. But nonetheless, I haven't had a season where my current team didn't offer me a contract, particularly at the end of the first year. Now, a downside to the way the contracts are offered, and we'll talk about this when it gets to be August more specifically, but you only have a few days to respond to them. And if you're not paying attention and you're not in races and you've just got it advancing, you can blow through the entire window and it will not stop the game to tell you, hey, you've got a contract offer. So you get an email on it, but it won't stop for that reason, at least not the way I have it configured right now. And I don't believe I'm doing anything differently than what is by default. Okay, so a couple of other things to look at. We can sort by the squad strength. Obviously, we can sort by teams or nationalities. As an American, I'm a little surprised I don't have an American team offering to at least talk with me. That's curious to me. Again, kind of talks about how poorly this season has gone for me. The other thing you might want to look at is the number of points you're offered. So these are the points that allow you to adjust your schedule, and eventually, once we hit level 5, and we're not there yet, allow you to pick teammates to ride with you in specific races. Though you spend points to do those things, and these are the number of points across the year that that team will give you to work with that. So this year, I believe we had 32 points to work with, and I'm not sure I've really spent many of them at all. Next year, Radio Papa is saying, well, you're doing well enough, we'll give you 44 points to work with. This is a good gauge of how strong your performance on a particular team would be. We would be a pretty strong candidate on this particular team. We would probably be a very weak candidate on this team. And it's not a one-for-one, but as you can see, the weaker teams are offering us more points. The stronger teams are offering us fewer points. So you have to decide how that wants to work. You have to decide who you really want to ride for. I'm taking a guess here, but I think different teams have different focuses in this particular mode. And I don't necessarily know what those focuses would be for any particular team. I'm not sure if you click on a team if it will tell you what they want to focus on. I'm not sure there's a way to discern that in this mode. You can see what riders want to focus on. When you click on any particular rider, it'll tell you their favored races. Here they are over here, but I don't think we get that for teams and what they're expecting to go after this year. From the screen, we can get a quick look at any particular team by if you click on the team name, it'll take you to that specific screen. If you just click in the area for that team, it'll show you their main riders that are under contract, and you can float over those and see if you have any information on any of those riders. Clicking on the team itself gives you the current roster of riders, so you'd be able to see how many riders there are. It tells you here, of course. You may know something about some of them. You can kind of get an idea of their classifications. If we come out and look at Radio Papa, we can see our classification, 950th. So again, not very strong at all this year. I'll try to stop belaboring that. I'm just a little surprised. I usually am doing quite a bit better at this point in the season. Okay, Some of our riders aren't even ranked, but as you can see, we evaluate at the highest for our team. So we're, for all intents and purposes, we're the best rider on this particular team. Whether or not management recognizes that today or not is another story. And nobody on our team has any victories, as we saw on the team I was looking at a moment ago. I don't remember which one it was. We'll just look at St. Michael though. They have one rider with a victory, so he's probably a fairly strong rider. I might want to take a look at him as we move forward if I see him in a race. But ultimately, I'm going to select one of these, and you'll notice you can't even add interest to this team because it is maxed out. Like I said, I'll go offline. I'll decide which of these I want to actually look at more closely, and I will pick it. I think in one of my games I went after RoadNet. That one worked out really well. I don't know anything about those riders yet, though. So, okay. After some consideration, I've narrowed my choice down to 2 teams, and I thought I'd go ahead and show the process I use for how I decide it. It's all but arbitrary, but here you go. I sort it by points that they're offering me per season. That tells me how much of a leader they want me to be on their particular team. Okay, and I decided I was only going to look at teams that are at least where Radio Popeye is. So I want to improve in my leadership role on a team. Now, I'm kind of spitballing this a little bit. I don't know that that's exactly what these numbers mean, but I think it's a good indicator. You'll notice these are all teams that are roughly where my team is. You know, there's no steps up with teams with significantly better riders or anything like that. And 2 jumped out at me, and I'll show you why they jumped out at me. But they were RoadNet. I mentioned that already. And then Beat. And I think I'm going to go with Beat. But here's what I looked at. If you click on a specific team, you get an indicator up here of the number of riders, and it gives you an indicator of how many of the riders are in any particular specialty. So this team has quite a few GC riders, and that's what I like to consider. Missouri, Chad, Missouri is a GC rider. So as I went through these, there were 2 teams that didn't have a whole lot of that, and one is RoadNet. Okay, they have very few. They've got a lot of time trial riders and sprinters. Also looking through here, they have 2 riders that are ranked, essentially. Roger Klege is a name that I have seen. He's been in a few Tour de France tours and a few other of the prestigious races, and you can actually see that if you click on him. It'll show you some of his history. The other thing I did, and then I looked at Beat as well. The other thing I did is I looked at nationalities. Everyone on this team is German, and while I am of German descent and have no problem with that, I thought, well, this is kind of a national team, and that is maybe a reason not to go with it. Also, almost all the riders are 22 or under. We looked at at results, and I could see where their team is participating and what they're doing. So you can see that their best finisher is often Klege for a huge portion of these, and they are often doing lesser important stage races. That's almost everything. But here's a prestigious classic they did. Couple under 22s, and these are only top 10 finishes, by the way. This isn't just what they're doing, but this shows where they're competitive right now. So this team is competitive in lesser prestigious races, but they are competitive in GC, which is interesting because they don't really have a strong contingent of GC riders. So they're doing well with what they have. You can look at a calendar and see what they have coming up, and I did kind of peruse that real quick. You know, theoretically it lends to what they're going to plan on doing next year as well. And I looked at their riders, in second time looking at this, but they have 17 riders. Okay, we're going to back out and look at Beat. The first thing that I noticed is Beat has a couple of Belgians on its otherwise Dutch team. Not that that matters to me as anything other than it just was something that I noticed, and looks less like a national team that is you know, that the strange American coming in is going to disrupt their flow. Again, very few GC riders. They do have a few ranked riders, and all of them are at my level or above. Ages vary, but there's only a couple of under 24s. So I'm going to get the opportunity to ride in some U22s, it looks like. And then if we, again, history doesn't show anything yet this year because we haven't finished a year, but if we look at the results, they have one strong rider who is doing fairly well, but where they're competing is varying between classics and GC, which makes some sense. Again, they seem to be low on GC riders. If we look at their calendar, they do have a couple of big rides that they have participated in, and they have a few coming up. So that's promising. And the stable of riders is fewer. They only have 12 as opposed to 17. I just felt like maybe I would fit in a little better on this team, be a piece that they can use, get more experience. The more you ride, the more experience you're going to end up with, and that's a good thing. That's the reason I'm going to go ahead and, at least for this cycle, take a look at Beat Cycling Club. So I'm going to come in here and find them on here, and I'm going to click the plus. And that's literally all I have to do. And I can change my mind right now. I could, if for whatever reason. I don't know if I go like back to the dashboard. I'm not quite sure when the ability for me to stop changing my mind occurs. It looks like I can still do that. But once I probably hit continue, or maybe when I lock it in with accept, that might be the determining factor. Let's take a look. Yeah, so I lock it in when I hit accept. And we have looked at this, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that email. Keeps it a little cleaner while I'm fast forwarding, and we will go forward from there. Now, I just mentioned how it's important to continue to have good finishes as you get into the contract season, and my next stage race was the Tour du Loir-et-Cher in France. And after the first stage, I was doing fantastic. I am in 4th overall. That's tremendous. And after stage 2, I had a decent finish. I believe I finished roughly 18th, and that bumped me down a little bit to like 8th or 9th. And then after the 3rd stage, I was sitting in, I guess it would have been 8th. I was sitting in 8th position after the 3rd stage. All is well, right? And everything's looking good. Stage 4 comes along and everything is working beautifully. We're moving right along, and then we get to 10 kilometers to go. And my luck in this particular season continues as it has been going. Take a look. We're clearly going to catch the breakaway here, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to have another top 20, and then I crashed. And I crashed pretty bad. So much so that I'm a minute 30 behind the peloton, and I cannot catch them at all. So fast forward to the end, and I finish 110th or so, and I fall 76 spots in the standings. So that crushes my hopes to maybe have a top 20, maybe a top 10. You never know. I was in the top 10 to this point. That's clearly not going to happen. I chose to take the 5th stage, and instead of trying to make a difference there, because that simply wasn't going to happen, I went for points, and I ended up earning the most stage points, except for the finish, of course. But I grabbed the 3 checkpoints along the way and was able to at least earn some credit that way, I suppose. But that just seems to be how things are going here in this particular season for me. So that sort of sums things up. All right, so this episode we covered a little bit about contracts, at least the start of the process. We'll get a little bit more into that as we move forward. And once I start getting contract offers, that's when it will really get exciting. I really appreciate your time this time. And until next time, fair travels.